is 0 or 1 depending on the random choice you have made. Right? So it's a random variable. It is a random variable. Yeah? Okay, that being said, now it's easy. Right? Now let's look at. So I'm going to continue from here. What is the expectation of this? The expectation of this obviously equal to expectation of this, right? By definition. But this is a constant. By linearity of random variable and expectation, this is essentially equal to expectation of this. Right? So the whole thing boils down to how do I calculate the expectation of this? But if you think about it, by the way, the random choice is still the same. Among the possible random samples, you choose one random sample. But one random sample doesn't mean one sample, it's a set of samples. Okay? It's a set of row samples. The expectation of this, if you think about it, is equal to the expectation of the size of this is nothing else. Here's, I'm going to use a random variable. Is the summation of I, L, I. And first of all, I don't have to look at any element that's outside the set XA. Because whether they are selected into my sample or not is irrelevant. Right? So I only look at those in the set of XA. And for those ones, if it's selected, it's 1, otherwise 0. So I just sum up these guys. It gives me exactly the size of this. So this precisely equals to this. I'm not doing anything else. I take the expectation outside. I'm just expressing this using a mathematical formula. That's all I'm doing. However, the random choice is still stay the same, which is you choose one random sample out of the set of random samples you may have. Do you follow me? This is the most critical step. Once you understand this, the rest becomes easy. Now by linearity of expectation, meaning for two random variables, y and z, expectation of y plus z, if they're independent, is essentially this. Right? And each of these ILIs are independent because that's by the definition of random sample. Each sample is selected independently from the rest. Yeah? So this becomes what? Summation of I to 1 to n, which is iterating through these guys. Because they're independent, I can use this recursively, so it essentially becomes expectation of I. The summation of expectation of these guys. Now, what's the expectation of this? This is easy to calculate, right? Because either 1 or 0. What's the probability is equal to 1? What's the probability ILI equal to 1? Sorry. Well, it's simply the probability is selected. What's the probability this equal to 0? It's simply the probability that it's not selected. So what's the expectation of it? It's simply both times 1, the first value, times its probability, plus the second value times its probability. It's just 1. Yeah? Yes? It's an indicator variable. If this particular value that equal to A is selected, it's 1, otherwise it's 0. How often is selected? With probability rho is selected. So the probability equal to 1 is just rho. The probability equal to 0 is just 1 minus rho. So the expectation is simply rho. With that fact coming back, this becomes simply, there are n of them, each of them with the expectation of rho, so it's essentially equal to this. The final output is this one, n. And a proof. So the expectation of this, if n, but n is essentially this. So it's equal to FAX annual proof. Okay, so it's unbiased estimator. I hope using this simple example, I can convince you that if you want to do so-called big data analytics, right? When you talk about big data analytics, which will be the topic I will be discussing in the next 4 lectures after today's lecture, you really need to have a strong foundation in statistics, analysis, and mathematics. Okay, system is not just about writing code. If you cannot reason well using logic, do these kind of things, trust me, I don't believe you can write good code. You have to be able to do analysis sharply using good logic in order to write good code at the end of the day. I tell you why. If you are going to estimate the GDP value of a population of 300 million, yes, suppose you are an excellent coder. I don't care how good you are. You're going to apply this linear algorithm exactly scan through 300 million records. And I know this, I can develop this estimator and sample 100 elements and estimate. My code might be really lousy, I know I follow this logic. I'm still going to beat you efficiency-wise by orders of magnitude. And I still get a very good estimation. So it may take you hours to calculate the value, it takes me just seconds. And I get an answer that's as good as yours, no matter how good a coder you are. Okay? So this is the point of, you need to understand this. But I will make sure you understand it, because I will test that in the final exam. Right? So maybe you don't care, but at least for the final exam purpose, you have to care. Right? You have to care. After my final exam, you may say, bye-bye, I don't care this anymore, fine. That also my control, but at least for the final exam, you have to care. I will make sure you care about this. Okay? Now, that's the proof number 1. Proof number 2 is actually easy. Why I claim proof number 2 is easy? Proof number 2 says, okay, so first of all, what is the thing I asked you to prove? The second one says, so the first one is just estimating the frequency of one element. What about a range, like a histogram? How many values between 10 and 50? How many students with GPA between 3 and 3.5? I ask you a range rather than just a simple how many students with value equal to GPA equal to 3.0, right? So that's the difference here. So a simple estimator I can construct is to change this slightly. Instead of saying FAX, I will say FA to B X, and random choice is still over this. I choose one random sample out of this set of random samples. Note that each random sample is a set of samples. It's not just one sample. Okay, a random sample is a set of samples. And I define that as, I change this condition. Everything else stays the same. By the way, she pointed out a mistake I had in my assignment. It's a typo. I forgot to scale back my overall. Obviously, that's a typo. Right? I think you, right? Thank you? Yes. So thanks for the correction. But that's obviously a typo. You should always scale back by a factor of 1 over rho. And you change this condition to, instead of say equal to A, you check whether the sample is within the range of A or B, between A and B. You just count how many elements are in the range of A and B in my sample. I do that count, then I scale back the count by 1 over rho factor. I claim this is a good estimation for, I define this as good estimation for this. How do you prove this? Well, you want to show the expectation of this as before, meaning expectation of this must equal to, so this is the missing part you need to fill in, but at the end of the day must equal to so on expectation it must equal to this. You follow me? Yeah? So how do I do that? How do I do that? Well, the proof is actually quite straightforward. You apply the results from 1 in the sense that the expectation of this is equal to the expectation sum of these guys. How many A's you have, how many A plus 1 you have, how many A plus 2 you have, all the way to how many B you have. That's precisely the definition of this, right? Then by linearity of expectation, the expectation of sum equal to sum of the expectations. So I push in the expectation operator, and then that gives me this. And by definition, that gives me this. F A B X. Okay? So that's the proof for this one, okay? That's the proof for this one. It's fairly, once you understand the proof of 1, the proof of 2 is actually quite straightforward. My final remark is really kind of like an open question that I want you guys to think about, right? Note that clearly the sampling rate rho should play a factor somewhere, right? In the extreme case, rho may take value from 0 to 1, right? It's a value from 0 to 1. When rho is close to 1, in the extreme case, let's say rho equal to 1, your estimation is exact because it's 1 over rho is 1 over 1, just 1. And the count in the sample is exactly the count of the original x. So it's exact. There's no error in your estimation. But when rho is very small, when rho is close to 0, obviously you expect your error to be big. But what's interesting is in our proof, the proof doesn't depend on the value of rho. So no matter what the value of rho, it's always a quote-unquote good estimator in the sense that the expectation always equal to what you want. So what's the catch? There must be some notion to say this should be better than this, right? Obviously, intuitively speaking. How do we capture that? Well, we only look at expectation. Another important indication for how good estimation is to look at the variance. For example, I can give you an estimation for the income of the total asset of Bill Gates. How do I estimate that? Well, I make two guesses. One is, let's say Bill Gates, the value of Bill Gates is $1 billion. $1 billion. Okay? Of course, he's worth more than that. But let's say it's just $1 billion. I give you two estimators. One estimator says Bill Gates' asset is $0 for half probability, and $2 billion for half probability. Is this a good estimation? Well, it is an unbiased estimator. 0.5 times 0 plus 0.5 times 2 equal to 1 billion. So it's an unbiased estimator. But is it a good estimator? No, it is not. The variance is big. Versus another estimator I give you, which is Bill Gates' income is like 1.1 billion with 0.5 probability and 0.9 billion with 0.5 probability. The expectation is also 1 billion, so it is also unbiased, but the second one is much better than the first one. Intuitively, what happened is this is the value you are trying to estimate. In the first estimator, your samples look like this. And average out, they give you this curve. They give you this value you try to estimate. But in the second estimator versus the same value you try to estimate, but they're more like this. After taking expectation, both are unbiased, but the second one is obviously much better than the first one. And this is captured by the variance of your estimator, And that's something I didn't ask you to prove in the homework. That's definitely something you should think about. What's the variance of these estimators? And how the sampling rate affects the variance of these estimators? Okay, that's what I want to say for homework 3. Now come back to let's switch gear. If you think this is too math, let's abandon all the maths. I promise you I will not show you even a single photograph for the remaining of this lecture. But that doesn't make the lecture any degree easier than what we had discussed. So either way, the point is, either way, you have to have good logic, okay? Whether there's maths involved or not. And my task for the remaining of today's lecture is to convince you that. What I'm going to show you next has no formula, but I will convince you that it's harder than what I have just discussed. Okay? Alright, so you're going to be good in computer science, you have to be good at logic and reasoning, okay? Whether you want to do math or not. Okay? So crash recovery. So last lecture, my PhD students told me that they have covered all the way to, they covered this, still no force and all that stuff, right? Have they? Yes, right? So basically, let me refresh your memory. If you allow still and no force, that's the fastest, but then you have to worry about undo and redo. You have to worry about undo and redo. Why? If you allow still to happen, that means you allow an uncommitted update to overwrite a page in the buffer. That means there's a potential chance that uncommitted update, that transaction may go back, so that you have to undo that change you have made to the buffer. So that's what still says, right? No force says, force means what? Force means that at the time of commit, when a transaction is ready to commit, you take all the dirty pages that's caused dirty by this transaction and force them to be written back to disk. In other words, you are interfering with how buffer manager works. Whenever a transaction commits, all the changes made by the transaction must be pushed back to disk. That's what force means. No force means, at the time of commit, I allow a transaction to commit. I allow the transaction to commit. But I do not force all the dirty pages in the buffer related to this transaction, of course, to be written back to disk. If you do that, you are not interfering with buffer manager, but on the other hand, you are running the potential risk of what? Of if system has crashed after the transaction has committed, because you didn't do force, the dirty pages made dirty by the committed transaction may be lost forever, because system has crashed, you lose everything in the buffer, and buffer hasn't got a chance to write some or all of it back to disk. Those dirty pages caused dirty by that particular transaction, because you are using no force. That makes sense? That's force and no force, that's still and no still. And the best combination is still and no force, but then you have to worry about undo because you do still, and you have to worry about redo because you do no force. Redo means that the transaction has committed, some dirty pages caused dirty by that transaction because there's no force, so it was not pushed back to disk at the time of commit for that transaction. Later on, system has crashed. When the system is back online, you need to redo those changes to make sure these changes are permanently reflected by the database. Why you need to redo? Because the durability requirement of the transaction. So redo is to ensure durability. What about undo? Undo is to ensure atomicity. Because if the transaction has rollback or forced to go back because system has crashed, it has not committed, then it should look like none of its action has ever taken place. So that's atomicity. So undo enforce this, and redo enforce this. What about isolation? Well, that's ensured by concurrency control. Consistency is easy. Once you ensure isolation and A and D, consistency comes for free, right? You ensure all the integrity constraint and the foreign key constraint are enforced. We have a brief discussion on that. That's automatically enforced once you have A, I, and D. Okay. So the way we enforce this is to use Red Hat logging. I think my PhD student covered this as well, so I will skip this part. The basic idea is for Red Hat logging, for Red Hat logging, the idea is for a transaction to commit, in order for a transaction to commit, the last log record written by that transaction must be pushed to disk in order for the transaction to commit. It's actually very intuitive why we must have this requirement, right? Because you are doing no force. You do not force the dirty pages of this transaction to be written to disk. Then you must have some way to remember what happened inside this transaction. And how do we enforce that? Well, all the log record by this transaction must be permanently reflected on disk before you can commit. Because once I have that, even if system had crashed and some dirty pages caused dirty by this transaction hadn't made back to disk, I still can use the log record to recover what the transaction has done. In other words, I can use the log record to redo some of the actions of that transaction. So that's the idea of Red Hat logging. And the way you enforce that is there is one value called flush ILSN that's always point to the last log record pushed to disk by the system. So Red Hat logging, the requirement basically says, in order for a transaction to commit, the largest log record of that transaction must be smaller than the flush ILSN value. In other words, it must have been flushed to disk. And there is something called page ILSN as well. Each page has a page ILSN. The page ILSN is the most recent log record that caused that page to be dirty, meaning the latest update operation applied to that page. And I record that using the page ILSN. Okay, so that's the idea of page ILSN. And another requirement for Red Hat logging is, another way to look at Red Hat logging is this requirement. For any page I, the page ILSN must be less than or equal to flush ILSN. Why is that? Why is that? Before page I is written to database log, log must satisfy this specific condition. Why? This is to ensure that you can really undo and redo, right? If you do not, if you think about it, if you do not have this condition, meaning there is a page whose page ILSN is greater than flush ILSN, and you have written this page to disk, you allow this page to be written back to disk. System crash. What happened now? There's no way you can undo that particular change. Because you lose the information about what has been done on that page. Because page ILSN is greater than flush ILSN, meaning the log record causing that page to be dirty is within this region. This region is volatile. Once system has crashed, it's gone forever. Does that make sense? So there's no way you can undo that change. There's no way you can undo that change. And that's why, in order to do undo, to ensure atomicity, because we allow steal to happen, right? We allow steal. And to ensure undo, we have to ensure this condition. To ensure redo, we have to ensure what? The max ILSN of any transaction must be less than or equal to flush ILSN. So there are really two conditions for Red Hat logging. Two conditions for Red Hat. Let me be explicit. Okay, so we must have this condition. And this one is to ensure undo. This is to ensure redo. Does that make sense? Right? Yes? Any questions? Okay. Now, so my definition told me to also cover this, so I will skip this. This is the log record format. And other log-related state is transaction table and the dirty page table. Transaction table has one entry per currently active transaction. It basically has the format of transaction ID and status. The status is running, committing, or aborting. It's interesting to note that the status can be committing and aborting, indicating that commit and abort itself is not necessarily atomic. It takes time. That's why it's committing, it is aborting. Does that make sense? So that process itself might not be atomic. And we also remember the last IOSM, which is the most recent IOSM written by that transaction. So to be consistent with the notation here, so this essentially is last IOSM. Okay? Last IOSM. And we also maintain a dirty page table, which has one entry per dirty page currently in the buffer pool. It has a particular value called record IOSM, the IOSM of the log record, which first calls that page to be dirty. So record IOSM is to be compared against obviously these two are different, right? Record IOSM is the very first log record calling the page to be dirty. Page IOSM is the very last log record calling the page to be dirty. And page IOSM is on the page, is stored with the page. Record IOSM is stored in the dirty page table. Okay, so here is the big picture. We have the log record itself, we have transaction table and dirty page table. We also have the flush IOSM, the last log record that's being flushed to the disk. And we also have page IOSM on each data page. We also have a master record. What is that master record? Master record is to remember when is the last checkpointing process you have done. When is the last checkpointing process you have done? So the normal execution of transaction is you do a series of read and write, then you follow by either commit or abort. We use straight two-phase logging, which means concurrency control is in place. We only have serializable schedule because straight two-phase logging only gives us serializable schedule. It also means that we don't have to worry about cascading abort. We're using still a no force with red hat logging. So when transaction commit, you must guarantee this condition for the reason I have explained already. And when that happens, this takes time, right? Because you are basically saying, I want to flush all the log record of this transaction to disk if they haven't been written back to disk. This may take some time, but typically this is very short. Because if you think about it, writing all the log records of this transaction back to disk versus writing all the dirty pages of this transaction to disk. Obviously, the first is more efficient because each log record is much smaller in size than a dirty page. That's observation number one. Observation number two, log records are written back sequentially, so these are sequential IOs. The dirty pages are most likely random IOs. Because you're making updates all over the place, potentially. So you're writing less amount data and you're writing sequentially. So obviously this is much more efficient than writing all the dirty pages. And that's the reason why people use no force with red hat logging for efficiency reasons. You can see now why people use no force with red hat logging, because it's way more efficient than force. Force means at the time of commit, you force all the dirty pages to disk. And when you finish that, meaning when you have ensured this condition true, you return from the commit process. You write an AND log record for that transaction. You write an AND log record for that transaction. And that's the time you will remove that transaction from the transaction table. You will remove that transaction from the transaction table. Before that, the status of that transaction in the transaction table is committing. Once you see the AND record is removed from the transaction table. Simple transaction abort. This means there's no crash involved. right? System doesn't has not crashed. You simply play back the log in reverse order. What that means is you get the last LSN for that transaction from the transaction table, right? Transaction table keep this information. What is the last LSN for that transaction? You take the last LSN, and that's the first action you need to undo. You undo that, and then you trace back the log. Remember, the log record has this thing called previous LSN, the previous log record for the same transaction. So imagine you start with the last LSN, you undo that, then you use the previous LSN to figure out what's the next action to undo. You trace all the way back. That's it. Okay. The only tricky thing is, while you are doing undo, you need to write a particular log record called CLR, compensation log record. Why is that? Why is that? Because undo is an update operation. Undo is an update operation. You need to remember you have undone a particular action by logging it. You need to remember you have undone a particular update operation by logging it to the user OCR. So this is essentially what a board process looks like. What's in the CLR? Well, the CLR log record basically remember something called undo next LSN, which is what is the next log record to be undone. And that essentially is set to the previous LSN of the current log record you are trying to undo. So the undo next LSN is essentially equal to previous LSN for the current log record you are undoing. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's what's in a CLR. Okay? The reason you need to remember CLR is that when system has crashed later on, when you try to recover the state of the system, you never undo a CLR. You never undo a CLR. Why you never undo a CLR? Why you never undo a CLR? Because CLR indicates that you have undone a particular object, right? Operation. Undo means what? Means you didn't do anything. So why you undo the CLR? You don't undo an undo. You don't undo an undo. That's the purpose of CLR. So whenever you see CLR, you skip that in the recovery phase, which I will talk about next. So now, next checkpointing. So the whole point is system may crash. Right? Going back all the way. System may crash. And couple of complications this may cause, right? This transaction, because you are using still, even though these two transactions have not committed yet, their dirty pages might have already been written back to the buffer, and may even have been written back to disk, right? Because that's totally that's the discretionary power of the buffer manager. If you allow still to happen, this dirty pages may reside in the buffer, but may also be already pushed back to the disk, even if the transaction has committed yet. Because if it is a buffer